Daniel Carter's head throbbed as he woke up in an unfamiliar place. His vision blurred for a moment, but as he blinked rapidly, the room around him came into focus. The walls were sleek, metallic, and glowing with soft blue lights. Strange symbols pulsed on the panels, and a faint hum filled the air. He wasn't on Earth anymore. Daniel tried to move, but his wrists were bound to the chair he was sitting in. Not tightly, just enough to keep him in place. Panic crept into his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. Think, Carter. Think. The last thing he remembered was stepping into a research facility. He had volunteered for an interstellar program, a chance to represent humanity in an alien experiment. Scientists had said it was about studying human adaptability in controlled environments. But this didn't look like a simple experiment. A sudden hiss broke the silence. A door slid open, and she walked in. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. The alien woman was tall, elegant, and unlike anything he had imagined. Her skin shimmered like polished silver, and her long, deep blue hair flowed behind her. Eyes like twin galaxies studied him with sharp intelligence. She moved with the grace of someone who had never known fear. She didn't speak right away. Instead, she observed him, measured him, as if deciding something important. Daniel swallowed. I assume this is part of the experiment." His voice was hoarse, but steady. The alien woman tilted her head slightly, as if amused. Then she spoke, her voice smooth, confident, and slightly accented. "You are mistaken." Daniel frowned. "Mistaken? About what?" She stepped closer, placing a hand on the console beside him. His restraints clicked open. Daniel immediately rubbed his wrists, watching her cautiously. "You were not chosen for an experiment," she continued. "You were chosen to be my mate." The words didn't register at first. Daniel blinked. "Wait. What?" She stared at him, unblinking. Daniel let out a dry laugh. "You're joking, right?" "I do not joke about matters of union," she replied. Her tone was deadly serious. Daniel stood up quickly, backing away. His mind raced. This had to be some sort of misunderstanding. He had signed up for a research program, not an intergalactic marriage arrangement. "This is crazy," he muttered. "I don't even know you." The alien woman remained calm. "I am Vieira, first daughter of the Typherian High Council. You were chosen based on your intelligence, resilience, and genetic compatibility." Daniel shook his head. "Genetic compatibility? You mean you scanned me without my permission?" Vieira didn't hesitate. It was necessary. He rubbed his temples, feeling a headache forming. "Okay, let's say this isn't some bizarre dream. What happens if I say no?" Vieira's expression didn't change, but her silence was loud. Daniel exhaled. "You don't let me leave, do you?" "You are free to leave," she said smoothly. "But understand this, humans are rare in our domain. If you refuse, you will be sent away to the outer colonies, where survival is uncertain. A place where few return." Daniel clenched his jaw. So he had two choices: stay and accept this unexpected alien proposal, be exiled to some unknown, dangerous part of the galaxy. Not exactly great options. "I still don't get it," Daniel said finally. "Why me? Out of all the species in the universe, why pick a human?" Vieira studied him for a moment. "Because your kind is different. Your people defy the impossible, rise against stronger enemies, and adapt where others fail. You do not submit to fate, you change it." Daniel hesitated. That was oddly flattering. Vieira stepped closer, her gaze never wavering. "This is not slavery, Daniel Carter. It is a choice, a partnership, a choice." Daniel took a deep breath. Was this really happening? Before he could answer, the door slid open again. This time, a group of Cypherian officials entered the room. They were taller than Vieira, dressed in elaborate robes, their faces unreadable. One of them, an older-looking male with a long, deep blue crest, spoke. Has he accepted the union? Vieira turned to Daniel. That depends on him. Silence stretched between them. Every eye in the room was on him. Daniel wasn't sure what to do. His mind screamed that this was insane. But another part of him, the part that had always chased the unknown, was curious. Was this really a trap, or was it an opportunity? He had one decision to make, and the entire fate of his future hung on it. Daniel Carter stood in the center of the alien chamber, every muscle in his body tense. The room was silent, except for the faint hum of alien technology and the rhythmic pulse of glowing lights along the metallic walls. The Hypherian officials, tall and imposing, watched him like a rare specimen under examination. Vieira, the alien woman who claimed he had been chosen as her mate, stood calmly beside him, waiting for his answer. Daniel licked his dry lips. His mind was racing. He had come here expecting a scientific experiment, not a marriage proposal from an alien noble. Finally, he spoke. "I don't understand," he said, his voice steady but firm. "You're saying I was chosen, that this isn't a mistake. But what if I say no?" One of the officials, an older Hypherian with a deep blue crest, narrowed his eyes. "Then you will be sent to the outer colonies, where no one will be responsible for your survival." Daniel clenched his fists. So it wasn't forced marriage, but it was a choice with serious consequences. Vieira took a step closer, her gaze never leaving his. "I know this is unexpected, Daniel Carter, but your presence here is not an accident. We have studied humans, and you are uniquely suited for this." Daniel let out a breathless laugh. "Uniquely suited? For what exactly?" Vieira's expression remained unreadable. "For me." His stomach twisted. This felt too surreal, too fast. Daniel rubbed his forehead. "Look, I'm flattered, really. But you don't even know me. How can you expect me to agree to this?" The older official stepped forward. "Allow us to explain." Daniel crossed his arms and listened, keeping his guard up. The official gestured to a holographic display that flickered to life in the air. It showed various alien species, each labeled with unfamiliar symbols. "The Hypherian people have thrived for centuries," the official said, his deep voice echoing. "Our technology is superior, our civilization advanced. But there is one thing we lack: change." Daniel frowned. "Change?" Vieira nodded. "Our society follows rigid traditions. We do not evolve in the way your people do. We do not take risks." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "And what does that have to do with me?" The hologram shifted, now showing images of humans, historical figures, explorers, scientists, soldiers. It was strange seeing his own species displayed in an alien archive. "We have watched your kind," Vieira continued. "Unlike us, humans are unpredictable. You defy the impossible. You adapt. You shape the world around you instead of letting it shape you. That is why you were chosen." Daniel swallowed hard. This was far bigger than he expected. "So what?" he asked. "You need a human to shake things up, to break your traditions." Vieira tilted her head. "In a way, yes, but it is more than that." She gestured toward him, her silver skin reflecting the soft blue lights. "I chose you because I do not want a union based only on logic. I want to experience something different, something that only a human can offer." Daniel stared at her, trying to process her words. This wasn't just about politics or science. It was about curiosity, emotion, something deeper. Daniel exhaled, his thoughts spinning. "I still don't get why it has to be me," he muttered. "There are plenty of humans out there." One of the officials scoffed. "Do you believe we would allow just any human into our inner circles? You were carefully selected." Daniel frowned. "Selected how?" Vieira's gaze softened. "Your history, your choices, your actions, they made you stand out." Daniel tensed. "You've been watching me." Vieira did not deny it. "We had to be sure." Daniel clenched his jaw. The idea of being observed without his knowledge unsettled him. But at the same time, wasn't this what humans did too? They studied things they didn't understand. They explored new possibilities. He sighed, running a hand through his short brown hair. "Let's say I believe you," he said. "What happens if I agree?" The older official answered, "You will become an honored member of our society. You will learn our ways, and you will stand beside Vieira as her mate." Daniel looked at Vieira. She was watching him with patience, but also with expectation. "I need time," he finally said. "This isn't a decision I can make in 5 minutes." Vieira nodded. "You will have time, but not forever." Daniel took a deep breath. He had never imagined his life would take such a wild turn. Was this a trap, a test, or was it an opportunity? For now, all he knew was that his fate was no longer in his hands alone. Daniel Carter sat on a strange, hovering chair in a private chamber. The walls around him shimmered, shifting between deep blue and silver, as if responding to his presence. The air was cool, almost unnaturally perfect. It reminded him of a futuristic dream, except this was real. He ran a hand through his short brown hair, still struggling to process everything. An hour ago, he had woken up believing he was part of a scientific experiment. Now he had been told he was chosen as the mate of an alien noblewoman, Vieira. If he refused, he would be exiled to some unknown world. If he accepted, he had no idea what that would even mean. A soft chime rang. The doors slid open without a sound. Vieira entered, her tall frame moving with effortless grace. Her silver skin shimmered under the dim lighting, and her dark blue eyes held something between curiosity and expectation. "You are troubled," she observed. Daniel scoffed. "Yeah, well, it's not every day an alien princess tells me I'm her future husband." She tilted her head slightly. "Does that displease you?" He sighed. "It confuses me. I don't get why me, and I don't understand why you think this will work. You said humans are unpredictable, that we change things. But what if I change things in a way you don't like?" Vieira studied him for a moment, then sat across from him. "That is the risk I am willing to take." Daniel narrowed his eyes. "That's a pretty big risk for someone in your position." She folded her hands in her lap. "It is." Silence filled the room for a few moments. Daniel leaned forward. "Tell me something," he said. "You're a noble, right? The leader. You have power here." "Yes." "Then why do you need me?" Vieira's gaze softened slightly. "Because power alone does not change the world. Ideas do." Daniel hesitated. That was not what he expected. Before he could respond, the doors opened again. This time, a tall, stern-looking Sci-Fian male entered. His sharp, deep blue features were rigid with disapproval. Unlike Vieira, he wore heavy ceremonial armor, decorated with golden insignias. Vieira's expression hardened. "Lord Savrik." The newcomer barely glanced at Daniel before addressing her. "Is it true?" His voice was sharp, almost metallic. "You have chosen this human as your mate." Daniel crossed his arms. "Yeah, nice to meet you too." Savrik ignored him, his glowing eyes fixed on Vieira. "This is unacceptable. A human cannot stand beside you." Vieira's voice remained calm, but there was steel behind her words. "The council approved my choice." Savrik's jaw clenched, only because they did not expect you to go through with it. His eyes flickered toward Daniel, filled with disdain. "This creature is weak. He does not belong in our world." Daniel felt his temper rise. "You don't even know me." Savrik's lip curled. "I do not need to. I see what you are. A mistake." Vieira stood up. "Enough." The command in her voice was undeniable. Even Savrik hesitated. Vieira turned to Daniel. "You asked why I need you." She gestured at Savrik. "Here is your answer. Our world follows tradition. It does not welcome change. But change is coming, whether they accept it or not." Zavrik's fists clenched. You are throwing away centuries of honor for this. Vieira's gaze did not waver. I am choosing my own path. Zavrik's expression darkened. Then he must prove himself. Daniel tensed. Prove myself? How? Zavrik smirked. A trial. He must face the right of the worthy. If he fails, he leaves. If he succeeds. Zavrik glanced at Vieira, distaste clear in his voice. Then perhaps he deserves to stand beside you. Daniel exhaled sharply. And what does this right of the worthy involve? Zavrik's smirk widened. You will find out soon enough. Vieira's eyes flashed with warning. This is unnecessary. Zavrik crossed his arms. No, it is essential. Unless, of course, the human is afraid. Daniel met his stare without blinking. He knew exactly what this was. A challenge, a way to push him out. But Daniel wasn't the kind of guy who backed down. He stood up. Fine, I'll do it. Zavrik looked mildly surprised, then pleased. Then it is settled. The trial begins tomorrow. Without another word, he turned and left. Daniel let out a breath. Well, that escalated fast. Vieira frowned. This is a mistake. Daniel shrugged. Maybe. But if they want me to prove myself, I might as well show them what humans are made of. For the first time, a small smile touched Vieira's lips. Then I hope you are ready, Daniel Carter. Daniel smirked. I guess we'll find out tomorrow. He had no idea what the trial would be. But one thing was certain. He wasn't going down without a fight. Daniel Carter stood in the middle of a vast circular arena, its walls glowing with shifting patterns of alien symbols. Above him, an unseen crowd murmured, their whispers a mix of curiosity and amusement. The air was thick with tension. This was the right of the worthy, the trial that would decide his fate. On the opposite side of the arena, Lord Zavrik stood tall, his deep blue eyes filled with arrogance. He was confident that Daniel would fail, that a mere human could not survive a Cypherian challenge. Daniel rolled his shoulders, shaking off his nerves. He had no idea what kind of test this would be. Combat. A mental game. Something worse. Vieira stood on the high platform, watching him carefully. He could see the concern in her expression. She had tried to stop this, but the council had already approved it. Now, it was up to him. A loud voice echoed across the arena. The trial begins. Suddenly, the floor beneath Daniel shifted and split apart, revealing a maze-like structure beneath the arena. Daniel barely had time to react before a pillar of light surrounded him, and he felt himself being pulled downward. In the blink of an eye, he was inside the maze. The first challenge. The labyrinth. The walls of the maze were tall and metallic, shifting slightly as if alive. Daniel took a cautious step forward, keeping his hands near his sides, ready for anything. A robotic voice echoed through the air. To prove yourself, you must escape. But beware, the path will not remain the same. Daniel frowned. A shifting maze. Great. He took a deep breath and started moving, keeping track of his steps. The first few turns were easy, but then the walls moved. Daniel jumped back as the corridor behind him vanished, replaced by a solid metal wall. The path ahead split into two new directions. Okay, that's unfair, he muttered. But he didn't panic. He had dealt with plenty of tough situations in his life. He wasn't going to lose to a puzzle. Daniel pressed forward, using his instincts, mapping out the maze in his mind. He took calculated risks, sometimes doubling back, sometimes sprinting through open pathways before they closed. Minutes turned into what felt like hours, and sweat dripped down his forehead. But finally, he saw it. A glowing exit. With a burst of energy, he ran toward the light and leaped through it just as the walls collapsed behind him. He landed on solid ground, panting. First challenge. Complete. The second challenge. The Guardian. Daniel barely had time to catch his breath before a loud roar shook the arena. He turned to see a massive alien beast emerging from the shadows. It was four-legged, covered in dark armor-like scales, and had piercing red eyes. The robotic voice spoke again. You must survive. Defeat is not necessary, but escape is impossible. Daniel clenched his fists. No weapons, no armor, just him and a giant alien monster. Fantastic, he muttered. The beast charged, and Daniel dove to the side just in time. The ground cracked where he had been standing. Thinking fast, Daniel scanned his surroundings. There were tall metallic pillars around the arena. Maybe he could use them. The beast lunged again. This time, instead of dodging, Daniel ran straight toward a pillar. At the last second, he jumped, grabbing onto a ledge and pulling himself up. The beast collided with the pillar, shaking the ground. Daniel smirked. Not so smart, huh? But the beast recovered quickly, circling the pillar. It wouldn't fall for the same trick twice. Daniel needed a new plan. He spotted a loose metal plate at the base of the pillar. An idea formed. He jumped down, grabbing the plate and positioning it like a shield. The beast roared and charged again. At the last moment, Daniel angled the plate toward the beast's face, reflecting the bright arena lights into its eyes. The creature staggered, blinded for a few seconds. That was all Daniel needed. He ran toward the next phase, leaving the confused beast behind. Second challenge, complete. The final challenge, the decision. Daniel emerged into an open chamber, where Vieira and the council members waited. Lord Savrik looked displeased. Daniel smirked. Not bad for a human, huh? Savrik scowled. There is one final test. Daniel tensed. Of course there was. A small pedestal rose from the ground, holding a Sci-Fi dagger. The blade glowed with ancient energy. The elder council member spoke. A warrior's strength is not only in battle but in their judgment. You must decide, will you swear loyalty to our ways, or will you leave? Daniel's hands clenched. He understood. This was a test of his will, not his body. He looked at Vieira. He thought about everything. The challenge, the way Savrik doubted him, the way Vieira believed in him. Slowly, Daniel stepped forward and picked up the dagger. For a moment, no one moved. Then, Daniel did something unexpected. He flipped the dagger in his hand and offered it to Vieira, not as submission, but as an equal. I don't bow to anyone, he said, but I will stand beside you, if that's what you want. The room fell silent. Then, to Daniel's surprise, Vieira smiled. You have passed. Savrik's face darkened, but the council nodded in approval. Daniel had done more than survive the trial. He had changed the game. Daniel Carter stood at the center of the Grand Hall, surrounded by towering Sci-Fi officials. Their expressions were unreadable, but he could sense their surprise. He had passed their so-called right of the worthy, but more importantly, he had done it his own way. Lord Savrik's eyes burned with frustration. He had expected Daniel to fail, to prove that a human did not belong here. Instead, Daniel had not only survived, but had won their respect. Vieira stepped forward, her silver skin shimmering under the soft blue lights. A small smile touched her lips as she extended her hand. You have proven yourself, Daniel Carter. Her voice was calm, but there was a new warmth in it. Daniel hesitated for a moment before taking her hand. Her touch was cool but firm. He wasn't sure if this was some ceremonial gesture or something deeper, but at that moment, it didn't matter. The head of the council, an elderly Sci-Fi with glowing markings on his forehead, nodded. From this moment forward, you will be recognized as a guest of honor in our world. You have earned your place. Daniel sighed in relief. At least they weren't throwing him out into the void. But then, Savrik spoke. This is a mistake, he said, his voice sharp. He may have passed the trial, but he is still an outsider. He does not understand our ways. Daniel smirked. Then I guess I better start learning. Savrik narrowed his eyes but said nothing. The council had already made their decision. Vieira turned to Daniel. "Come, there is much to show you." Exploring the alien city, Daniel followed Vieira through the vast corridors of the Typherian capital. The architecture was unlike anything he had ever seen. Floating platforms, holographic bridges, and crystalline towers that shimmered with shifting colors. The city itself seemed alive, adapting to its inhabitants. Everywhere he went, Cypherians stared at him, some with curiosity, some with doubt, and others with quiet approval. "This is the first time your people have brought a human here, isn't it?" Daniel asked. Vieira nodded. "Yes, most of our kind see your species as unpredictable, dangerous even." Daniel chuckled. "Yeah, we get that a lot." She studied him as they walked. "You do not seem like a warrior, yet you fought well in the trial." Daniel shrugged. "I'm not a soldier. But humans don't always win by being the strongest. We win by being smarter, faster, and sometimes just plain stubborn." Vieira's lips curled into a small smile. "Stubbornness. Yes, I have noticed this about your kind." Daniel smirked. "You don't seem to mind." She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she led him to a large balcony overlooking the city. The sight was breathtaking. Ships gliding through the air, glowing towers stretching into the sky, and a massive planet visible just beyond the horizon. "This is my world," she said softly. "I was born here, raised to follow its rules." Daniel leaned against the railing. "And yet you decided to break one of the biggest rules by choosing a human." Vieira turned to face him. "Because I believe there is more to existence than following traditions. My people, we are powerful, but we are static. We do not change, we do not grow. You, however, are different. You challenge what is possible." Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. "So, this is really about shaking things up." Vieira shook her head. "It is about understanding. I do not want a union based on obligation. I want to learn what it means to choose." Daniel hesitated. This was all so much bigger than him. He wasn't just some random human in an experiment. He was now a symbol of change for an entire alien civilization. "That's a lot of pressure," he admitted. Vieira's expression softened. "You do not have to decide everything today, but you must be willing to walk this path with me." Daniel exhaled. "All right, but if I'm gonna be here, I need to know more about your people, your culture, your history. If I'm going to be part of this, I don't want to just be a bystander." Vieira nodded. "Then let us begin." A lesson in Typherian culture. Over the next few days, Daniel was introduced to Cypherian customs, language, and traditions. The language barrier. While Typherians could speak through translation technology, Daniel insisted on learning their language himself. It was difficult, with complex tones and shifting patterns, but he picked up basic phrases quickly. The bonding rituals. Unlike humans, Cypherians did not marry for love. Their unions were arranged based on logic and compatibility. Vieira had broken this rule simply by choosing him. Combat training. Even though he wasn't a warrior, Cypherian culture valued strength and agility. Daniel trained with their sparring instructors, quickly learning how to adapt to their fighting style. As days passed, Daniel noticed something strange. Vieira, despite her noble status, spent more time with him than with her own kind. She watched him closely, curious about his actions, his choices, his emotions. One evening, after a long day of training, Daniel found her waiting for him at the balcony again. "You have adapted faster than I expected," she admitted. Daniel chuckled. "Guess humans are good at that." She tilted her head. "And yet, you still hesitate." Daniel exhaled. "Look, I won't lie. This whole thing is crazy. A few days ago, I thought I was part of some research study. Now, I'm in the middle of an alien courtship." Vieira's expression remained calm. "Do you regret it?" Daniel thought for a moment. "No," he admitted. "It's terrifying, but also kind of amazing." Vieira's eyes locked onto his. Then perhaps, Daniel Carter, you are more Xiferian than you think. Daniel smirked. Or maybe, you're more human than you realize. For the first time, Vieira laughed, a soft, genuine sound. As the city lights glowed beneath them, Daniel realized something. He wasn't just learning about her world. He was becoming part of it. Daniel Carter had spent days adapting to Xiferian society, learning their ways, and proving himself worthy of standing beside Vieira. But despite his progress, there were still those who wanted him gone. And no one wanted that more than Lord Xavrik. Daniel could feel it, the way Xavrik watched him, the way his words were always sharp and filled with doubt. Even though Daniel had passed the right of the worthy, the noble still saw him as an outsider, a mistake. And tonight, Daniel was about to learn just how far Xavrik would go to remove him. The accusation. Daniel sat in his quarters, overlooking the glowing Xiferian city. The skyline was breathtaking. Floating platforms, energy bridges, and endless towers that stretched into the stars. A part of him had started to like it here. But just as he was beginning to think he could find his place in this alien world, the doors burst open. 2 Xiferian guards stormed in, their weapons glowing with pulsating energy. What the? Daniel stood up, raising his hands instinctively. You are under arrest, one of them declared. Daniel's heart pounded. What? For what? Before he could get an answer, Lord Xavrik entered the room, his face cold and emotionless. Daniel clenched his jaw. Let me guess, this is your way of getting rid of me. Xavrik smirked. You broke Xiferian law. Daniel narrowed his eyes. What law? The guard stepped forward, restraining his arms. He didn't fight back. Not yet. Xavrik paced slowly, enjoying every moment of this. A human interfering with our noble bloodlines is forbidden. You were given trials to prove yourself, yet you continue to corrupt Vieira's judgment. Daniel's fists clenched. She made her own choice. Xavrik's expression darkened. A choice based on your influence. Daniel gritted his teeth. He wasn't surprised. Xavrik had been waiting for an opportunity like this, to turn the council against him, to remove him before he could change anything. The guards pulled him toward the door. You will be exiled immediately, Xavrik declared. Thrown into the outer colonies where your survival is unlikely. Daniel struggled, but the guards were stronger. Vieira won't let this happen, he growled. Xavrik's smirk widened. Vieira won't have a choice. Daniel's stomach twisted. What had they done? Vieira's defiance. Meanwhile, Vieira stood before the Xiferian High Council, her voice calm but filled with restrained fury. This accusation is absurd, she said, her sharp eyes scanning the room. Daniel Carter has done nothing to harm our people. An elder council member sighed. He is disruptive. Vieira stepped forward. And what if he is? Is that not the reason I chose him? To challenge our ways, to teach us something new. Xavrik, standing among the council, smirked. Your emotions cloud your judgment, Vieira. The law is clear. Vieira's fists clenched. This is not about law. This is about control. The council remained silent. Some of them agreed with her, but Xavrik had too much power. That's when she realized they had already decided. Daniel was being taken away as they spoke. Her heart pounded. She couldn't let this happen. Without hesitation, she turned and ran from the chamber. Escape. The guards dragged Daniel toward a waiting transport pod, the metallic structure humming with energy. It was meant for criminals, and now they were treating him like one. Xavrik stood nearby, watching with amusement. You fought well, human, he said mockingly. But in the end, you were never meant to stay. Daniel took a deep breath. He had one last chance. The moment the guards loosened their grip, he acted. Using the combat skills he had learned, Daniel twisted free, elbowing one guard in the ribs before sweeping the legs of the other. They fell hard, caught off guard. Xavrik's eyes widened. Stop him. But before they could react, a blast of energy hit the ground, creating a shockwave that sent the guards stumbling. Daniel turned toward the source of the blast. Vieira stood at the entrance, holding a glowing energy staff. "Come with me," she commanded. Daniel didn't hesitate. Together, they raced through the corridors, alarms blaring behind them. The palace guards chased them through the floating platforms and glowing streets, but Vieira knew the city better than anyone. She led him through a hidden passageway, deeper into the underground levels of the city. Finally, they reached a small escape ship, sleek and fast. Vieira turned to him, her breath steady. "We need to leave now." Daniel stared at her. "Are you serious? You're giving up everything for me?" She held his gaze. "I am not giving up anything. I am making a choice." Daniel exhaled, nodding. They jumped into the ship, and Vieira activated the controls. The engines roared to life as the hangar doors opened. Just as they were about to take off, Zavrik and his soldiers appeared, weapons raised. "Stop them!" Zavrik roared. Blaster fire filled the air, but Vieira was faster. The ship soared into the sky, dodging incoming fire as they shot toward open space. Daniel looked out the window, watching as the Typherian capital shrank below them. He turned to Vieira. "So, what now?" She took a deep breath, her expression unreadable. "Now we decide our own future." Daniel smirked. "I think I like the sound of that." As the ship vanished into the stars, they both knew this was only the beginning.